you to ask questions as we go along. Having run a number of these sessions now, they are great when they are interactive. So please do chip in and ask any even very awkward questions as we go. But on that, and then towards the end of the session, I'll also wrap up as well and just kind of capture any notes that come out as well. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand you over to Paul, who's our CTO, and he's going to talk you through and facilitate the main session, let's say. Paul.
So thanks, Mark. Good morning, everybody. So yeah, we've got quite a lot of content over the next hour. We probably won't get to all of it, and we'll move through it relatively quickly. But the presentation, the Prezi that we are going through this morning, we'll make sure is sent as a link to you, so you'll have access to all of the sort of the content that's behind here if you want some more information. So this is what we're going to be covering. We'll do an introduction. We'll talk about some of the RPA principles and some example use cases that we've seen work really well, and then also do a demonstration of invoice matching, and then finally talk a lot about the governance, about what are some of the things that you should be thinking about when you look to be deploying sort of intelligent automation into your organization. So as Mark said, happy to take questions as we go along, but we'll go through at quite a pace to make sure that we fit within the hour. So just starting, introduction, sort of a quick history lesson. I mean, basically, where did RPA come from? Well, it came from sort of the screen scraping and automation tools that really only when it was combined with artificial intelligence to manage the exception handling, did it then really create the RPA tools that we have today. And in terms of applications, we as embracent, we partner with UiPath, which, as you can see, is the sort of the market leader in this space, with about 5,000 clients. And that's what we'll be showing you a demonstration of a bit later. So we'll be demonstrating UiPath, but actually one of our roles is really to be constantly evaluating the market. And at the moment, we're actually looking at quite an exciting new application called Talkabot that will really provide a way to rapidly integrate with platforms. So we're sort of looking at that as well at the moment. So in terms of delivery, I mean, the technology is only part of the solution, and it's actually a pretty straightforward part. But what we've seen successful is to ensure that you are automating the right processes. And this could mean process change as well as automation. So that's one of the things to be considering. And certainly when it comes to delivery of these RPA solutions, we recommend the sort of use of a hybrid analyst developer type person, because they're able to understand the processes and really sort of build out the business cases to justify the automation, but also to build it. So certainly the technology is relatively straightforward. So really people with a strong process background can often really take this forward. And actually one of the questions that we often get asked is a lot around, should you automate a bad process? And the obvious answer is no. Why would you want to automate a bad process? But actually what we have seen is that sometimes if the business case makes sense, so that the time saving to your people will actually give them some headroom to actually really then take a step back and understand what it is they're trying to achieve, and to perhaps go back and rework that process better. So what it all must be, though, is sort of underpinned by having a strong business case, and really every process should be held up to that. And what we've also sort of really seen be successful is the adoption of obviously of a deployment methodology, and how we sort of propose that can be done is through this sort of idea of an automation center of excellence. So we're the ACE, as we call it. So this sort of governs the overall delivery, but also looks at the post-deployment, where the business case realization is measured. And that's really an important thing to consider. Often when you build a business case, you sort of think, wow, this really makes sense. But actually what you should do, particularly with RPA tools, is really continue to measure that. And typically what we see is that there is a sort of ramp up over the first couple of months, where the confidence in the organization is getting adjusted to using RPA tools. And then over a couple of months' time, you then start to really see that benefits realization that you're expecting to get from that. And obviously, a key part of the methodology that you need to consider is around the communication to the business. When people first hear about RPA and robots, they get a little bit nervous. But one of the key things is to keep that central theme of making sure that the idea behind it is to release people to do more high value activities. And that's something that is really key when you're deploying RPA tools, is that it's that messaging to the business as to the business the benefit that the people will get from using it. And really what we see is sort of two different ways for delivering RPA. With some of our clients, what we're seeing is that they want to become self-sufficient over time. And really, we give them the opportunity to sort of work, once the center of excellence is established, is for them to go and take that forward themselves. And we've seen that work really successfully, where people already have an established team, but they need some assistance getting over that first hump of getting the first few bots being delivered. For other people, what they're saying to us is what they require is a fully managed service. They just want an organization to come in and really help them and deploy that for them and support it, and even in some cases operate it. So really what we're seeing is there's sort of two different ways in which bots can be brought into an organization, and each has their own strengths and weaknesses as we go through that model. So really that was just to really set the initial sort of view on RPA. Is there any questions from what I sort of discussed there? So as I say, conscious of time, we need to get really into it. I'm going to pass you over now to Jeff, who's one of the emerging technology leads at Embracent.
Perfect, thanks, Paul. Yeah, as Paul said, Jeff O'Donoghue. I'm an emerging technology lead for Embracent alongside Michael. Michael will be talking just now. We're just going to be taking you through maybe just a few RPA principles, through the methodology, and then just sort of how to identify good use cases within an organization. And then Michael will be taking us through a very interesting invoice matching machine learning demonstration. But if we just jump into the RPA principles, just to start off, just to lay the ground. So, I mean, we talk about RPA and we talk about intelligent automation. So RPA, it allows you to develop and configure computer software as a bot to emulate human actions, allow organizations to automate manual process efficiently. And they're non-intrusive bots, which means they just leverage off your current systems within your organization, and they sit on top, and they almost work as a fast or super user on those applications. And then intelligent automation is sort of a holistic solution for your digital transformation. So this focuses on sort of the orchestration, the users, the tasks, all your systems, and including your RPA robots. We combine analytics and artificial intelligence in automation, and this helps us make intelligent decisions using RPA and allows us to integrate in legacy systems. So if we just have a look at the evolution of automation. So we see it as 4 pillars. We see it as starting off as assisted intelligent automation. We move across to unassisted or unattended. Then we move to sort of autonomous, or what we call machine learning. This is where you start seeing the intelligent come in, and then moving over to cognitive. So if we just step into assisted, just to start off. Thanks, Paul. So this is where we call it's RDA. This is remote desktop automation. So this is where a user will manually launch the robot, and it generally works on another screen or a desktop, where they will log on to a server or virtual machine, and they'll have the robot running alongside them while they're working on their other screen. We call this a digital assistant, obviously because it's manually triggered and it works alongside a user. And this is a very important stage because this is where you sort of build confidence within an organization and show them how they can understand how robotics actually really works and how it assists them. And a lot of time, this is very important, especially for your workforce, just to make sure that they know that these things are assisting and working alongside them and not doing their sort of jobs for them. And just an example of sort of remote desktop automation, we can think of sort of doing Excel manipulation, creating an Excel import, and then uploading that import into a finance system. So you can see very manual tasks that they do that just sort of time wasting almost when it can be done through automation. The next stage we move on to is unattended. So unattended is where we sort of move from digital assistant to sort of a virtual worker. And we say it's a virtual worker because we have a 24-hour capacity on this unattended robot. And these unattended robots, they are kicked off with triggers. So that trigger can either be a time trigger or a data trigger. And this is also where we sort of implement Orchestrator. So Orchestrator is a centralized robot management system. And we also perform analytics and monitor live robots with the system. And this is also where we do our scheduling. So if you schedule it, you can say, let's start at 9 o'clock at night, and it can run for 4 hours, and then it will log onto the server itself, do the automation, complete the process, and then log off again. And a great example of this is at our last client is they had, at the end of every month, for the last 6 days of the month, they would have to download 250 reports every night, and those reports would have to be ready for when the employees came in the morning. So what they found over those 6 days is they were taking shifts for people at the end of the afternoon to schedule 250 reports, and then they would come in at 6 o'clock the next morning to make sure all those reports were there ready for when the employees came in. So now if you think about it from an automation point of view, is we built a robot, it would log in itself into the system at say 9 o'clock at night, it would schedule all 250 reports and then log out of the server. At 6 o'clock, it would run, kick itself off again, log back in, download all the reports, it would check that there is 250, any ones that were missing, it would manually download them and save it in a folder in a directory for when the employees got in. So there, it saves them time having to sort of doing that scheduling after work and also coming in early to fetch those files. So if we just move across to the next stage, now we talk about, this is where the intelligence really starts kicking in. And this is where we sort of see the introduction of machine learning. And this is where we use machine learning to classify and structure the input data before kicking off a robotic process or a robotic task. It's a sort of end-to-end solution. And we take our virtual workers and now we create a virtual workforce that is extremely and scalable. And we use auto scaling and load balancing at this stage to monitor and manage those virtual workers. And then if we move across just to the last stage, this is where we see the cognitive stage kicking in. And this is where you actually see the robot making cognitive decisions and informed decisions by itself without any human input. Just an example of this is we can think of if a robot is working with a finance system and you've caught all the exceptions, but one day it logs into the system and there's a random pop-up on the screen. It will notice that there's this pop-up on the screen. It will analyze it and it will deal with that pop-up. And next time that pop-up comes and it runs, next time it runs, it will automatically know how to deal with that pop-up. So, I mean, you can just see this is sort of where we see the processing of unstructured data and your sort of predictive and prescriptive analytics comes in at this stage as well. So if you guys have any questions on sort of the 4 pillars or the 4 stages of automation?
I think, Jeff, just something for me. I think one of the reasons why, we see organizations really adapting and adopting this quite a lot is, I don't know what your organizations are like represented on this call, but many organizations we work with, they have lots of repetitive tasks that they do, whether it's month-end tasks or year-end tasks. There are lots of things where people are just, kind of uploading, downloading, sharing, combining data. I was talking to a client yesterday where they've got 2 systems that don't talk well together. So often, they have to take data from one system, put it into another. Businesses are full of these kind of repetitive tasks. And even if a certain amount of logic has to happen to change the data in between those tasks, what we're seeing is all of that can be automated, all of it. So this is, I don't know how far some of you are on your journey with that robotics, but we will all be using robotics over the next year. It's just about where and how far, because it's just a new tool or relatively new tool for us to automate all of those terrible, boring, repetitive tasks that we've all had to do in the past, but we don't have to do in the future because this will just work. And we'll see when we go through this. It's very easy to set up some of this technology. As we were saying before, the technology is not the hard bit. Understanding the process is the hard bit.
Would it be worth me sharing a little bit of my experiences, given that we've gone live with a couple of bots at some point?
Joe, do you mind just, and this probably goes for everybody, just before you ask a question, just introducing who you are?
Sure, apologies. Yes.
Bit of context.
I'm the FD at Stanton House, apologies. So we have been working with embracent for a few weeks now and have installed a couple of bots as long as some other pieces of work. I don't know now is an appropriate time, given that you were talking about some of those repetitive processes.
Yeah, I think that's great, Jo. Thank you.
Okay, so just to bring it to life, two big processes which are linked to the fundamentals of recruitment around getting our net fee income right. We've automated over the last few weeks. First one plays exactly to that repetitive nature of, a vast majority of our interims are, they're highly paid. We're at the higher end of the scale. We don't want them double keying information into one timesheet system that the client wants and another one that we want. So what that meant is that we spend the time rekeying that information, which clearly is inefficient, but also means that there's human error there. And the last thing we want to do is get some interim pay incorrect. So now we don't do that. We press a button and this bot goes off and it gathers the data from all of the various portals that our clients use and it sweeps it up into ours. So all we're doing is a review and a check. Manual error's gone and the speed is there, which is brilliant. But the one I get most excited about is the actual process of running our fee income. This used to take us 5 hours. It takes 7 seconds now. It's just brilliant. So my staff members, who you're right, were a little bit nervous to start with, now press that button and there you go, 7 seconds later, there's our information all sorted, ready to upload. And we're spending the time looking at it, doing the so what does this tell us, rather than that repetitive nature. And the bit that then really gets me excited is this liberates me. So no longer does this have to be a once a month process. I can do this every week or more frequently if I choose to, because it is so quick. So all of a sudden that insight that my business needs, I can give to them on a plate. We're still in that assisted, we press the button mode, but I can see us getting towards something a little bit more sophisticated in the future. Yeah, so just to bring it to life a little bit, we're on our 2nd month of running this, and it really has changed the team's life, and we're talking about other things that we can change in the way that we work now, if that's helpful.
I think, Jo, I mean, the great thing for me is, when something takes 5 hours, you're not going to run it all the time, are you? And you're certainly not going to do, kind of what if analysis or different scenarios or whatever. It's a pain in the backside to run once a month, let alone every few days. So the fact that you can automate and do it in 5 seconds, 7 seconds, is amazing. Although I did think that we were still going to make a cup of tea for you, though, weren't we? I think that was the next phase. We wanted a robot that would actually.
Oh, I've got a lot of things you can do for me. A cup of tea would be great. Yeah.
Sorry, Jeff, you carry on. Thank you for that, Jo.
No, perfect. And I think, you guys hit the nail on the head. I think it's just sort of identifying and noticing which are your best sort of processes for automation. And if we just have a look, it's pretty much, if you think about it, like Mark and Jo both alluded to, it's your highly manual, your repetitive sort of tasks that you do on a daily basis, say sort of high volume. Rule-based are very important. It makes it easier to develop and deploy quickly. And also you'd like to look for something that's got a low exception rate, so it doesn't need too many variations within the automation. And I mean, if you just think about it, a bot is built through a set of instructions. So it handles if-else statements. So we just put those different variations in, and it can deal with it when it gets to them. I think one of a good sort of process I'll say, sort of run you through is from our last client, and just to get you thinking a bit of what the sort of processes that could fit best in your organization. We had a client, a veterinary client, and every day they would have to do what's called a daily take-ins. This veterinary client, they owned about 800 different clinics, and every day each of these 800 clinics would have to send through an Excel spreadsheet to the head office, and the head office team would have to take that information, so it's split into your profits, your cash, your card, your vouchers, and take that, put it onto a master sheet. From that master sheet, run macros on the master sheet in order to create an import sheet. And from that import sheet, they would just upload it into a finance system. They have to do this every single day. So if you think about it, 700 times a day across a week, we think about almost 3,500 across the week. At the end of the month, you're talking about 15,000 times they would have to do the same process over and over again. And if you think about it, it's the same thing for all 800 different clinics. So you can see that's highly repetitive. It's a rule-based task. And it's just, you shouldn't have people doing something 15,000 times over and over again in a month. So that's just one example, if you can think of, that is just it stands out perfectly for sort of automation. Sure, thanks, Paul. I think what we're going to do now is Michael is going to take us through sort of an invoice matching demonstration that we've just sort of done for a client with incorporating some machine learning. So Michael, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeff. Morning, everyone. My name's Michael Amato. I'm the other emerging tech lead for embracent. So responsible for the technical delivery across our clients. And I think, yeah, I mean, thanks, Jeff, for running us through the principles and hopefully bringing some of this to life with a few examples. I'm probably going to expand on it a bit more and hone into a specific example for you guys. Hopefully this will show you a bot in action and also maybe show you some of the machine learning capabilities that we've actually managed to build into this. So are there any questions on Jeff's side before we jump into it? Anything that pops into your mind regarding some use cases that you know in your business, or should we just jump right in? So the use case I just like to hone in on today is the invoice matching piece. So what we see a lot across clients in their accounts payable departments is a very time-consuming month-end process where they have to take invoices from multiple vendors, which can come in multiple different formats, different templates for each of their suppliers, manually process these invoices, and extract the data, look at the invoices, often printed in front of them, and then log onto the finance platform, whatever that may be at that specific client, and then perform a matching to understand whether what is presented on the invoice actually matches what's on the finance platform, and then posted or not. We find this can take a lot of time on month end and really be a high volume, highly repetitive task that's quite generic across finance departments. So Paul, if we jump into the solution we have to this. So the sort of end-to-end solution we've developed for this encompasses some machine learning and some RPA, as you'll see in the demonstration. And we almost like to think of this as two tasks for a robot. The first task would be actually extracting the information from the various invoices. Again, reminder, these can come in all different formats. So the first task really is to unpack that. Is it a scanned document? What's the format? And then get all the information that's required, whether that's just the PO number, the date, the total, those sorts of generic fields. And then the second task would really be around going onto the finance platform, clicking around just like a user would. And I mean, that's really what these bots are. They use the system much like a user would, just a little bit faster. And then actually using the data that it processed from the invoices, clicking around the finance platform and actually performing that posting. So Paul, if we just jump into sort of what we call task one of our end-to-end solution for the invoice matching use case, what the bot would first need to do then is read in the information that's coming in from these various invoices. So what we first do is we read it in through an OCR engine, optical character recognition. And what this does is it reads it into text. So it ensures that even if you have scanned documents, scanned PDF documents, that the robot will be able to bring this in effectively. What we then do, and probably the sort of where you're going to see the machine learning come in, is we pass this text that's extracted from the invoice through a machine learning model, which has been built in conjunction with our partners UiPath. And this machine learning model is trained to pick out specific data points that are generic across an invoice. So whether that, like I mentioned earlier, whether that's your date, your PO number, your total. And what it'll do is it'll return all the specific values that you've asked for, along with a confidence threshold associated to each of those values. So like I said before, there's no templating, for example. It can take in any invoice as long as it is an invoice and it has those specific data points. We'll then pass it through our machine learning model and it'll return a confidence along with the numbers associated. So Paul, if we can just jump into the example of that. So what I've done here is just run our machine learning model through 5 or 6 sample invoices. So as you can see on the bottom left of the slide, there are 5 sample invoices, all different formats, coming in from different vendors, if we're looking at it as from accounts payable division. And what we've got there, the table in the middle, is the results from that extraction. So as we ran it through the machine learning model, we've asked it specifically in this case for invoice number, total, and date. And we could expand on that. That's just what we've done for the example. And you can see the results from the five invoices, where it actually gave us the numbers. For example, if we just hone in on that first row, invoice number, I put in some dummy data, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was 94% sure of that, and that was actually correct. The total was 10, 94% sure of that, and the date, 91% sure of that. And we could actually then use this data and pass it on to the robot, which then processes in our finance platform later down the line. What we've also built into the solution is just what we call a validation station. So we can actually set a confidence threshold on any of those values. And if they're below that threshold, we can then prompt a validation station for a user to actually say yes or no, this data is correct, just to make sure that we aren't going to process something downstream on the finance platform that isn't necessarily the correct data. So Paul, if we just jump into a video example of validation station. So as it started, we could just pause it, Paul. Yeah, that's perfect. If we just let it actually run through 1 second, Paul, just so it pops up. Yeah, there, perfect. So like you can see in our example here, let's say 5 of the invoices worked perfectly straight through on our machine learning model, gave us the right results. And the 6th one maybe had a problem. So then the user would be prompted for validation station just to say, I'm this % certain of these numbers, please can you validate them or actually change them out if they are different. So if we let it play through, you can see the data on the left, the user has to validate. So it is an invoice. The invoice number is what it picked up, 012903. So it's going to tag that and it's going to tick it off. It's going to scroll down. The user saying the total 460, that's correct. The date. And if we just pause it here, Paul, let's use an example here where we know that our finance platform uses a PO number which doesn't have any letters, only has numbers. And you can see the bottom value that was picked up on the left is SP010129 with 73% confidence. So for example, let's say we set our confidence to be 80%. So that's why we're asking for validation here. And now let's actually assume we want to change that out and exclude the SP. The user working with this robot can actually do that and then send this for processing downstream. So now we're going to tag it without the SP. We're going to change the value out. And now we're going to save that off. And the robot's going to use that one that we've manually edited, along with the 5 that went through completely straight through without any manual interaction. And now it's going to move to the finance system and complete the process. So if we just pause back, Paul. Yeah, one more. So I think in terms of the sort of journey that Jeff was taking you through earlier, what we just saw was number 3, where we sort of bring in the machine learning to help us with the input data to the robot. What we're going to see now is sort of stage 1 and 2, which is your more traditional RDA or RPA, which is where a robot's just working on a system, mimicking user interactions, and it's leveraging off the data that it got previously. So I think what's key to note is what we're about to see can be mimicked, for any process, like Mark discussed earlier, highly repetitive tasks. And we've just brought in machine learning in the specific use case, as it was a good one because of the different invoices that can come through from suppliers. So what we've done is we've taken the data from our 6 invoices, as we showed you earlier, and now we're going to run those through on a finance platform and perform the matching. We've used Dynamics 365 as a demo, but this could be configured for any finance platform. If we just pause it here, Paul. So any action you're about to see on this 40-second video is performed by a bot. It's a bot clicking around the system. So as you can see, if we play it through, Paul, it's launched Dynamics 365. It's going to wait for it to load. If we just pause it again, Paul. The bot is built to wait for the system to load. So it's not just going to try and click until something is loaded. We've also built in any pop-ups that come onto the screen. It's learned to look for them if they appear, yes or no, and then click off them if it needs to. So I don't know if you just saw it flash up quite quickly, but there was a pop-up saying dive into Microsoft Dynamics, and it just clicked OK, I'm going to do that. So if we let it play through, the bot's going to now perform the task. So the first thing it does is change the company. Then again, it's always waiting for the screen to load before it continues. Now it's going to go into invoices. It's going to create a new one. And if we just pause it here, Paul, what it's actually doing is using the data that it collected from the invoice earlier. So that's contained in its memory, and it's going to enter it into the platform. You can just let it play through. It's entering all that data. It's creating the invoice. Once again, now it's going to accounts payable. It's going to search for the PO that it extracted from that invoice. If we just let it play through, Paul, it's going to search for the PO. It's going to select it. If we just pause it here, what it's now doing is you can see the line item at the bottom, item number 1117. Again, in the background, what it's doing now is performing that matching. So a lot of the tasks on a robot you will see, just like a user will work on the front of a screen, but sort of the times where it's doing a bit more of the thinking, it's doing in the background. we aren't seeing it read in the data, and there's nothing on the screen to say yes or no, this matching is performed correctly, because it's thinking of that in the background. But what it's done is it's validated the data, and now it's actually going to go and post it. So if we let it play through, it's going to now click update match status, and it's going to post it, and it'll read in that final sort of message to say it was successful, and then it'll stop executing. So I hope it was sort of useful to actually watch a bot in action. It really does almost look like a user, just sometimes it's clicking a lot faster, but when it's waiting for the system, it's waiting for the system just like a user would. So I hope that brought it to life a bit more. And I guess now, are there any questions on the specific use case or anything that pops into your mind just around use cases you may have in your business?
So should we just go back and look at a couple of examples just to get people's thoughts processes? So Jeff, do you want to pick up some of these?
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should just ask the audience, first of all, is there anything on this list that sort of stands out from your guys' point of view, from processes that you, as soon as you see one of these bubbles, you thought, oh, that's definitely a big one in our company or our organization?
So I'm currently the group systems analyst. Really the things I'm looking at are finance improvements. So this is right up my street of interest, obviously. I think we already kind of use invoice matching to an extent through Basware and Kofax, but we are looking at we're upgrading that at the moment as well. So kind of going through this process. But one bit that stands out for me is the running of reports. Obviously at finance month end, you're running constantly standard reports. What we find is we've got reports that people are maybe having to download. I mean, finance people love Excel. So they're downloading them from one system, manipulating them in Excel, and that piece is taking a long time, which is taking a pain. But I go back to what you say on the communication piece being key, because I find when I speak to a lot of people around the process improvement part, a lot of it is we've always done that and it works and we're comfortable that it works, and they're not sort of thinking, but I could be doing other stuff if I get rid of this piece. So I think definitely that communication piece is really, really vital to bring people on board of it. And it's not just we're going to take away your work, essentially.
Yeah, in some organizations, one of the things that we do is we sort of talked about the attended option and then moving to attended over time. That can be something that really we see builds confidence in the users, that they know that the bots are doing what they expect and they interact with them. And over time, they go, right, okay, I'm confident that this works. And then you can transition into sort of the unattended way where, as I say, they walk in and the reports are there ready to go for them.
Yep. I used to work for Shell before, and we had a sort of dedicated RPA team inside who worked on all that side in terms of invoice processing and things. And my role at that point was to look at the errors and look at how we fix the errors, and that's definitely key to building that confidence piece.
I also think there's something else here as well. And now I'm saying this as, having been a CIO for a number of businesses. So I'm kind of, kicking myself in the foot here, which is that, a lot of people in businesses get used to this idea that any changes to the main systems take months, and you kind of ask for stuff to be changed and you kind of never see it again. What's also really valuable, I think, is to kind of show people that you can make a change quite quickly. Your upgrade to your system might take months, but actually a small bot could be introduced in a matter of, kind of a couple, 2 to 4 weeks, something like that. So there's nothing better than showing people they can ask for something, you can deploy it really quickly, and then they'll start thinking, oh, right, okay, hang on a minute then. If we can start to do things in this much more interactive way, I've got a list as long as your arm of things that I'd really like to be changed, but they get into this mindset, I think, of any change to the technology is going to take forever,
agreed.
And therefore they stop asking. And once you show them that things can move quickly and it can get done, suddenly you'll get actually the kind of the floodgates can open if you're not careful. You've got to try and manage it a little bit. But
absolutely.
It shows
because the nature of sort of RPA, the software, it sits on top of your systems. It doesn't need changes to the underlying environment and technology. It sits on top of and works independently. So it's very easy to actually deploy the technology into your organization without having to re-engineer everything underneath it and really get the benefit quickly. As Mark said, we typically see between 3 and 6 weeks having the bots up and running. So that sort of gives you an idea compared to my background is ERP, which is multi-year type deployments.
Same.
It's very different. You can choose a business process, get that up and running, get that working, And actually, one of the things that we talk to a lot of people about is sort of almost fail fast. Use RPA technology to really take a couple of processes, see if it works for you, and then get the benefits, realize the benefits quickly, and then if it doesn't work, move on to something else without having a huge investment up front.
That's the thing. There's a great one. Ones that I love around finance, especially, Karen. You know, month end stuff. You know, you get used to this idea that everybody in finance at month end is running around pulling their hair out because they've got all sorts of reports to run. They're running stuff overnight. They're coming in early. You know, they're staying late because reports need to be pulled together and consolidated and analysed. And you kind of, when you look at that in the context of what you can do with automation and robotics, you kind of have to go, right, okay, is that what you really want to be doing then in the future?
Yep.
Do you want to keep running around like that? Or do you want to schedule some of this and automate some of this? And then, you know, as we were saying earlier on, you can spend more time looking at what the numbers are actually telling you rather than just preparing the numbers, you know. And
that's the key.
Much better finance job, isn't it?
And it's bringing people along on that and making them aware that's what they can do. Something else I'm looking at just now is that in terms of balance sheet reconciliations, and people spend so much time getting to the point of what the number is as opposed to actually what's it telling me. Is there something I should be looking at here?
Or what they do is, you know, we've just been doing something for a big bus company, and they spend a long time getting to the number, what the number is. But then also lots of people don't quite believe it either. You know, there's a lot of argument about whether that is the right number or whether it's not quite like that. You know, there's a slight lack of trust around the number as well.
Because you can't explain it and you can't analyze it. Absolutely.
Correct. And the fact of automating it and you know, part of the automation process is to understand and document and automate the process. So it's repetitive as well, and therefore, you know, it will produce the same data in the same way, you know, every time it does it, and therefore
it builds that confidence, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly right.
I mean, I suppose if you look at some of these examples that we have here, I mean, obviously the documentation of the process and things like this, but really what stands out is some of the ROIs that we see. Because of the rapid way that you can deploy this technology, the return on investment is very strong. And as I mentioned earlier on, the key thing about that is really to measure that as well and really to show the benefits realization that you are getting from that is key. So having a strong business case behind each process and then measuring it going forward is something you should very much consider if you're deploying RPA technologies.
Hi, I'm Global Finance Director. I'm not on the same page with you guys on this, and some of it's right, but I think some of it is more probably shinier than it can be. My experience is as follows. Some of this is old technology now. Some of the stuff we're talking about here is actually old technology in reality. That's been done before. If I take supplier statements recs in our organization, one of the biggest companies that does just supplier statement recs walked away from the automation of ours because of our ERP design. And when I look at basically robotics, I look at it in two areas. I look at one, what can we put on the ERP platform, as you said earlier on? And secondly, what can you do by virtual employee? We've nearly given up now on what we can do on our platform because we can't deploy. And we use UiPath and we've used Blue Prism on these angles as well. And our ERP systems are so clunky and the design is so direct and unmovable that we have actually, as of last week, kind of said to ourselves, the only way forward here is through virtual employees. So we're going down the route basically of creating, you know, larry.boss@kier.co.uk, who will use the actual keystrokes opportunity to do that therein. And it's not just in our side of the house there in terms of, I think a lot of journal processing. It's one that should be probably a bubble there. We've seen in finance with a load of journals being processed throughout our organizations. And the thing that gets back to me, the payback's massive, absolutely massive. But you need an IT function that's living in the 21st century. Because IT functions that aren't in the 21st century find this difficult. You need a CTO, a CIO who's seen this in action and can work this through. Because if you don't, you will be stuck and you will be dealing with what I call Luddite behavior. So I know that from my side, I can probably take out 50 FTEs through robotics. And I am not getting the way through at this moment in time. We've had 3 different organizations in working with us, and they've gone down to the angle that the way forward on our actual platforms is too difficult. And we're running 2 at the moment in a beauty parade, one on master data We've given 150,000 transactions to upload onto test systems for master data purposes on project setup. And secondly, a test of 10,000 journals on manual journals. The winner of that will get the whole works therein. And we're working at a monthly fee where we're looking at 15 robots to be provided for up maybe between 10 and 15,000 pounds. So the payback's massive there, but I have to be realistic. And secondly, I do think that with cloud computing, a lot of these will finally get into the cloud. And I think a lot of the robotics and RPA, because when you transfer, an example, we're on basically one of the 2 big ERPs. And when we move from our current version into the cloud, we will get rid of all of the vagrancies and the special snowflakes and all the nice to haves we built around it. They'll go away, and the cloud will therefore support a lot more of the robotics that were there as well. How do you guys feel about that? Because, you know, some of this is yesterday's technology that we've been told about today, and we already know that. It's about moving what is going to be 10, 15 years from now. You know, my youngest girl is 15, 16. She's looking at her career. I'm not telling her to get into finance administration because, you know, 20 years from now, everything will be in robotics. Everything will be automated. There will be very little exception handling. It'll be more about analysis, as we've said early on. And I think, you know, if you look currently at financing, you've got people who are transactional, you've got people who are reporting, and business and analysts. Transactional is gone. Reporting is gone. The future of finance with robotics is all based on business information and support.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, you know, first of all, I fully agree with you, Dan. I mean, I think that's where the future is absolutely going. And, you know, we work with a range of different businesses in a range of different ways. And, you know, we've pitched a session here at people who are, you know, kind of new to some of this stuff, whereas clearly you're a lot further down the line on the line. So, you know, we do a range of different things for a range of different businesses based on where they are. I don't disagree with you at all. But, you know, one thing I would say is, and I said this to the CEO of a very large electronics manufacturer in Germany about 3 months ago, was, you know, he was pushing for Industry 4.0, what the future might look like, you know, and really trying to get a sense of where are we going with all this. And I said to him, I kind of get all of that. That makes perfect sense. And of course, we must do that. But also, we're still dropping boxes off the conveyor belts. You know, we're still actually doing some of the basics really badly. So one of the things that we try and do as well as a business is help businesses do the basics really well. Some of this is transitional. There's no doubt about it. You know, in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years time, it'll be different again. And that's why we are constantly evaluating the technology. As Paul said, we are technology agnostic. Actually, we're constantly looking at what the next thing is. But to be fair, what we find is that most businesses that we talk to, when we talk to FTSE 350, you know, kind of 500 million to $1 billion turnover, we find that most of them don't even do the basics very well, if I'm really honest. And therefore, you know, we could actually do a lovely presentation based on what might come in 3 years' time. But actually, some of the basics need to be sorted out first. And so, you know, I totally agree with what you're saying, because I know that's where the future is. But I also know there's a lot that we can do with a lot of businesses right now. You know, we work with various different house builders using coins, you know, and coins is a terrible product, right? So there's a lot that you can do. Sorry, just getting it out there. There's a lot that you can do around these ERPs and these kind of different systems to improve them before you replace them, or to improve them without spending a lot of time and money. So we try to find those kind of pragmatic ways. But inevitably, this is you know, we all know, and to your point, my lights went on about 2 years ago when I saw some of the guys on this call using some of the RPA technology in earnest, and I thought, crikey, you know, that is just phenomenal. So the whole point about getting a CTO, a CIO, you know, that's really kind of leading the charge around this is really key. But again, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we've pitched this presentation at a very practical level, because there's a lot that many businesses are just not doing at all right now.
I'm a massive fan on this, I've got no doubt, but I think you have to, when you go on any journey, two things happen. One, you need to know where you want to go. And I'm minded by an old Japanese proverb, never share your bed with somebody who doesn't share your dreams. You need the right person on the journey with you, which is why you're here talking to us today. Our month-end process has gone from basically 4 people at it to 1 person over 20 minutes. Yeah. So I've seen the benefits of this. It has been difficult. It is not a bed of roses. I can just tell you practically, I've reduced my team from 393 down to 152 as of yesterday morning over 2 years. 140 of that's been through robotics. In an industry, construction, infrastructure, where we have been hammered over the last 2 years. And in my organization, where we're FTSE 350, we have struggled with elements of investment in that line as well. The benefits are there. All I'll say is you get into the garden, be careful where you walk. There are a few minefields there, right, along the way. Make sure you've got the right person holding your hands, because there are easier ways to do it, which you're showing here to it all. But practically, you know, when you're talking to your kind of sponsors of these projects, be realistic with them and have your IT guys and your legal guys on the journey with you well in advance.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Thank you for that, and I love that proverb. I may well steal that if you don't mind. That's
no problem. It's an old 14th century one.
Any other kind of observations around this? I'm conscious time is getting ahead of us, but we might want to just quickly cover off, because I think some of the things that you've just raised down there very eloquently around this kind of whole governance piece that we would call, which is, you know, how do you make sure that this goes well? Paul, shall I hand back to you for
yeah,
we've got a few minutes left, but so we'll have to be quite timely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is a typical part that we see around the delivery model. And certainly we're very much at the start, just having a discussion to you now about some of this RPA awareness, because many organizations aren't clear as to how they want to and the types of processes that are good for that. And then typically you would move through a proof of concept, which is very showing you the speed on your systems of robotics on a particular process. And then really following that POC really gives that kind of idea, okay, it will work with my technology, and then move forward into a pilot. So to take that POC solution and then really build it out, because the POC won't handle the error handling, and the error handling is probably the key part of what we look to do. But we then build that into a fully functioning POC and make sure that you have the architecture in place to actually go and deploy that successfully into production. And really, that's where we start building out this center of excellence. So typically we work with organizations to establish the center of excellence very much upfront. And then we go forward identifying use cases. And everything that we look to do, every process, as well as documenting it, seeing if there's opportunities to improve it, but also calling out the benefits. Because actually, many people will come with examples of processes, but actually, when you really get into it and understand that process, you really need to call out how much time that saving looks like. And typically, you'll find a number of low-hanging fruit that you can really move on quickly, deliver those, and get that benefit quickly. And then over time, we then transition into sort of a delivery model, which can either be over time a transition to your organization to be self-sufficient in that, which we work with organizations to do. Or, as we mentioned, the other option is to take a managed services offering where actually you remain hands-off and the operation and the delivery of everything is done by the partner. What we are seeing, and coming back to that point before, UiPath in particular, over the next sort of 6 to 9 months, everything will move to the cloud. So everything will be deployed on the UiPath cloud and will connect to your systems locally. So you have nothing that needs to be deployed locally. That path and can be managed, all of that can be managed for you under a managed service offering, including the operation. So if there are exception handling and things like this that needs to happen, making sure that if reports aren't running successfully, that it's reinitiated, that can all be done through that managed service. And then going forward into just sustaining that and supporting that is really a typical delivery model mechanism that we see. And coming back to that point, most bots, to just give you that idea, can be delivered within a 4 to 6 weeks maximum. And what we find that as people become more confident and comfortable with them, they start to bring forward other processes that they see in their organization that could benefit from that. And very much the focus today has been around back office, sort of finance processes, but we do certainly see front office, certainly even in IT, sort of provisioning of new users as an example, where initially people think, can it be done? And then what we do is you can, across multiple systems, you can deliver that through a bot. So these are just certain use cases and a methodology by which we can then go and make sure that this is deployed to you. Okay, so we've got about 4 minutes left. Is there anything anyone wants to call out at this point from what we've seen? So Mark, do you want to?
Yeah, so thank you for that. I mean, obviously we've covered quite a bit. You know, we've pitched this at a certain level, intentionally. You know, so if there are things that you know you want to know more about or you want to hear more about, then please, you know, we can talk about that separately. Hopefully it's given you a pretty good introduction into some of the basics around automation and what you can and can't do. And maybe if you've not already, you know, started this journey, it's giving you some good kind of insights into what can be done, what is achievable. Now, I will kind of reiterate that, you know, the businesses that we talk to, many of them still run many manual repetitive tasks across the organization, and those are ripe for automation. You know, so I think it is you know, it's worthwhile just thinking about that, you know, starting to show the art of the possible within the organization. But I do very much like what Dan was saying, which is about, you know, if you want to share your bed with somebody, make sure that you share the dreams, because there is a direction of travel here. That's absolutely true, and it's good to know what that might look like. But also not to frighten people along the way. And, you know, this kind of automated center of excellence that we talk about is really critical to a large part of what we do, because, you know, it's a simple phrase, but it incorporates a lot of different things about how you get stakeholders involved, how you have the conversation around the board, how you communicate effectively and you don't worry people or kind of, you know, get them frightened for their jobs. There's a lot that needs to be thought about in this. But I would encourage you as well, though, to kind of get started, because, you know, you could spend 6 months talking about things. And, you know, I'm not a great fan of the phrase fail fast, Paul, but I do like the test and learn. You know, you will learn a lot. If you haven't done any automation at all, you will learn a lot by doing some automation. And then, you know, in a few months' time, you'll know a lot more about some of the questions to ask. So now I would encourage you, you know, with the right vision, the right engagement at the board level, with the right kind of sense of direction of travel, to really start to get into this in more detail if you're not already. And if you do want to, you know, find out any more, ask any more questions, please do. On the flip side, you know, I'd just like to thank you all. It's really been great to talk to you. I hope it's been, you know, kind of not too boring for you all. I hope it's been a reasonable start to the day. Hopefully at some point we'll be able to do this with coffee and croissant again, and that would be really nice. So thank you very much for your time, and I do hope you have a lovely day.
Thanks, Mark. Just from a Stanton House perspective, if you've got any questions, please do reach out. We can see if we can get you the answers there, but hopefully, as I think Dan mentioned, it's been a really informative and useful session for everyone. So thanks, Mark and team. Hope it's been of use.